Morning again, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 32, verse 5. Chapter 32, verse 5. The people have come to Aaron. We discussed yesterday what their intention might have been in requesting the golden calf. They asked for the golden calf. He asked them to bring in gold. They create some form, and the general understanding that really the Medrash really seems to get from the pasuk is kind of like the golden calf, like kind of came out of nothing almost. I mean, they had the materials for it, but it was far from clear that it would become that. The bottom line is, one way or another, they came to Aaron. Aaron was agreeable in some sense. He told them to bring gold, and a golden calf was built. And now it says in verse 5, Vayar Aaron, Vayiven Mizbeach Lefanav. And Aaron saw, and he built an altar. Vayikra Aaron Vayomar Chag Lashem Machar. And Aaron proclaimed and said, a holiday for Hashem tomorrow. In light of our discussion yesterday, I want to point out that the word being used for what they wanted when they asked for an egel, when they asked for something, was a variation on the name Elohim. I'm saying it because it's not referring to God here. Here he's saying Hashem. So this sort of highlights some of the issue we were talking about yesterday. Okay, question number one. What did Aaron see? What did Aaron see? Does it mean that Aaron saw there was a calf there? There was a golden calf there? Had it not said that, would I thought Aaron would have been oblivious to the fact that a golden calf had been created? Hard to believe. What was Aaron's thought process in building the altar? Has Aaron decided that he's going to worship this idol? To the extent that Aaron wants to build the altar, why is he talking about tomorrow? All these questions really jump out at you when you look at this pasuk. Let's see the Ramban on pasuk Hey. Vayar Aaron. Tam ze akasov shera osam bira mechavnim al ha'egel. So literally, Vayar means to see, but it could also be to understand, to perceive. So he got them in a different way now. He perceived the depth of their incorrect intentions vis-a-vis this golden calf. Vikam ubana mizbeach, and he built an altar. Vikara chag lashem machar, and he says, okay, there's going to be a holiday to God tomorrow. Sheyizbechu lashem hamiyuchad al hamizbeach asher bana hu lishmo. That he says that the Jewish people should build an altar to God on the Mizbeach, which he built with Hashem in mind. Guys, I don't want you all building separate altars. I don't want 25 altars going up. Bilti laHashem levado. So the Ramban is saying that he needed to take hold of the situation. So he built the Mizbeach because he didn't want them doing things, because if they do things, who knows where it's going to go? And he specifically proclaims the purpose of this altar is tomorrow we're going to get together and serve Hashem, not the golden calf, but Hashem, the same deity we've been serving since we left Egypt. The Yitachen. So again, just to sum up, Vayar means that he understood the depth, that they were all over the place right now. And everything else that he's doing in this pasuk is he's trying to control the path. Now, this is a very famous idea. Rashi talks about it. Rabbah says it's possible. The reason why he says tomorrow is to stall. Ula yavo Moshe v'yas v'sa egel. Maybe in the interim, Moshe will arrive, and then all this craziness will be over. But I mean, you tell people, we're gonna, if you come sometime tomorrow, Mr. Meisler's on it. Sometime tomorrow, we'll ask everybody to set up the chairs for the high holiday services. What time will they show up? If you don't tell them to come at the crack of dawn, the only question is before or after noon, right? So he says, tomorrow we're going to get together and do this, right? So hopefully Moshe will be back by then. And the very next pasuk, verse 6, says they got up early in the morning. So again, he's trying to stall. This is the greatest proof. Forgive me if this sounds cynical. This is the greatest proof that this is the evil inclination. Because if it was the good inclination, it would be harder for them to be jumping into this. But he says tomorrow, they say, great. What time is, Scott, what time is Alos HaShachar tomorrow? We'll be there. And they brought different offerings. V'lo Omar hakasu vayalu lo olos vayagishu lo shlamim. Really interesting as well. So if you look at verse 6, it says they got up early in the morning and they brought ol and shlamim offerings. Says the Ramban, the normal wording would have been they brought to him olos. They brought to him shlamim, meaning they brought these offerings to God. And that would be very much parallel with the end of verse 5, because Aaron didn't say there's going to be a holiday tomorrow. Aaron said there's going to be a holiday to God tomorrow. So in the next pasuk, when it talks about the offerings that they brought tomorrow, of course, it should be to God, because that's how Aaron framed it. But that's not what it says. There were people who had in mind Hashem, like Aaron said. And some people had in mind that they were serving the golden calf. And therefore, it doesn't say the offering was to God. It doesn't say the offering was to the Egel, because it was varied. The only consistency was there were people bringing offerings. A few psukim later, God says to Moshe, I got to tell you what's going on down there. And he says they made a calf, and they bowed to the calf, and they sacrificed the calf. Now, how do you reconcile that pasuk with what we discussed yesterday in the Ramban? The Ramban said yesterday they didn't want a God. They just wanted a liaison to God. So why would they be sacrificing to the calf and bowing to the calf? So the answer, I think, is twofold. So the first part of the answer is what the Ramban just said. Hashem's not saying everybody was doing that. Hashem is saying some of the people were doing that. And those are the people who sinned in the most grave manner. That's one part of it. So there were people sincerely asking for a liaison. But there were people who had other things in mind. And I think the second part is very, very important. The second part is, and I think it's indicated by the first word of this verse, Aaron saw, which I think means, as we have all the time in life, sometimes people make a pitch and their inner thoughts and feelings are not necessarily exactly in step with what they say. So what they said to Aaron was they want a liaison. And probably everybody who was speaking said that. But now Aaron sees it's not exactly what's going on. And I suppose that some of the people were saying one thing, some of the people were saying one thing exactly meant that, and some of the people were saying one thing meant something very different, but they knew that wouldn't fly with Aaron. And then, as is the way of the world, most likely, some of the people just got swept away, right? Maybe they didn't have an opinion, or maybe their opinion was it was going to be a liaison, but now everyone else is doing it, so I'm into. Vim ulai haya Aaron hamakiv korbanos, amar stam vayalu alos vayigishu shlamim, ki mechaven l'shem Hashem veim datam alegel asher asu vayu abalim faglim. Okay, one more possibility for why it doesn't say that they brought to him, God, or to it, the calf, offerings. And this is sad to think about. So the first pshat the Ramban said is, well, among the people had different intentions. Second pshat the Ramban said is, well, maybe it was Aaron on one side and everybody else on the other side. And maybe Aaron's intention was, of course, Aaron's intention was God, as he said, but maybe everybody else was in a different boat. So this is very, very interesting to think about, and this is far from the only approach to this issue. Okay, I want to jump ahead now to verse 16. Let's actually start with verse 15. Vayifen vayerid Moshe min har. So now Moshe leaves God at Har Sinai, at the mountain, and comes down. Ushnei luchos ha'idus biyado, and he has these two holy tablets in his hand. Luchos ksuvim b'shnei evrehem. The tablets had writing on both sides. Mizel mizehim ksuvim. And the writing was on both sides. Okay. Verse 16. Valuchos maseh elokim hema. The tablets were made by God. Va'michtav michtav elokimhu, and the writing was the writing of God. Charus al aluchos, etched onto the tablets. Why is this important information for right now? In other words, if I were to ask you to tell the story and you knew all the facts and you didn't have a chumash in front of you, I'm pretty sure what practically each of us would have done would say, Moshe came down from the mountain holding the tablets. And let me tell you what he did once he saw them, right? Isn't that what we would have described? This is not even the place for it. The Torah already described the holy tablets. I mean, we know, this is not the first time we've heard about the tablets. Maybe we haven't heard these descriptions of the tablets. This should be a few parshas ago. This should be at the giving of the Torah. Let me tell you what the tablets that Moshe had from God, what they were like. Why are we telling this here? So let's see the Ramban. Ramban and Pasuk Tesayin. V'haluchos maseh elokim hema. Hayaroi sheyasker kasav kol maseh haluchos b'pasuk vayitena Moshe kasher amar ksuvim be'etzba elokim. It should have said this before when it talks about God giving Moshe the luchos. Our point here is to talk about, to emphasize the greatness, the unique status of these tablets. Lomar kilo nimna Moshe b'chol ze m'lashaber. They were the most unbelievable things that any human being had ever touched in this world. These were these perfect tablets made and written by God. And yet, Moshe knew the right thing to do was to destroy them, and he did it. Moshe didn't know he was going to get another set. He was so enraged when he saw this that he knew the right thing to do was to break the tablets, no matter how precious and how remarkably unique they were. And he couldn't hold back from doing it. And I want to be very clear, the Ramban, and certainly this is the Gemara's approach, the Ramban is not saying Moshe lost his cool and made a mistake. The Ramban is saying it was Moshe's passion for the honor of God that made him do this thing that was the right thing to do. But were not a person passionate about it, it would have been remarkably difficult to do it. But for Moshe, it was the natural thing to do in the moment. Oh, there's a whole different approach to the Ramban based on the Medrash. I'm sure many of you have heard this Medrash before, that or variations on the Medrash, that as Moshe approached the spot of the golden calf holding the tablets, the letters on the tablets began to fly away because they were so holy. And it was, as it says in these psukim, it was a writing from God. They couldn't tolerate being near this tremendous impurity. And if you go with that pshat, then actually Moshe's breaking the luchos was physically demonstrating what had spiritually already occurred. In other words, the luchos were no longer the luchos. The letters had left. Okay, so we discussed this morning the Ramban regarding Aaron's thought process in constructing the altar. We also discussed another interesting Ramban regarding the importance of the Torah's describing the unique sanctity of the luchos at this juncture. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Debbie. I had something like that in my mind, but I couldn't crystallize it. I was too busy talking. I couldn't get it straight. So I appreciate it very much. For those at the Wednesday night Navi class, Debbie is just creating a parallel between Aaron stalling to get, hopefully Moshe will come down before anything happens, and Shaul, we learned about last night, stalling, waiting for Shmuel to come. Very interesting parallel. Thank you very much. Thank you. Scott, did you have your hand up before? Okay, sorry. Okay. Any other comments?
Rabbi Rosenbaum?
Yes. Rose?
What date did this happen? I'm all confused. Was this, we don't celebrate it or not celebrate it. I mean, it's a negative.
We do.
Do we?
We don't
What's the
celebrate it,
date?
but we mark it. You ready?
Yeah.
17th of Tammuz.
17th of Tammuz.
Shabbos Tammuz. It's one of the things, it's
Okay.
one of the tragedies that happened in our history on the 17th of Tammuz, the first of the summer fasts. Thank you for asking. I'm sure there are others that benefited from that. Thank you for raising it. To give, I want to talk a little bit more about the dates from all, because I think this is really powerful in all kinds of ways. Okay, so the scene of the giving of the Torah, 6th of Sivan, 7th of Sivan, it's around Shavuos, right? Moshe was up there 40 days, comes down 40 days later, sees the golden calf, breaks the luchos, that's the 17th of Tammuz. Moshe then goes back and davens to Hashem for another 40 days. After, like, he goes up like the next day and davens to Hashem for 40 days that he should forgive the Jewish people. And Hashem tells him after 40 days, yes, I'll forgive the Jewish people. Okay. Hashem tells him, yes, I'll forgive the Jewish people. And let's spend another 40 days, you and I, sort of recalibrating, the Torah, creating a new set of luchos. So here are the dates on the creation of the new luchos. Rosh Chodesh Elul was the day with the beginning of the 40-day period for the creation of the new luchos. And the day that Moshe came down with the new luchos was Yom Kippur. So it's very interesting. So much of our calendar is rooted in remarkable events that occurred on a date. So Yom Kippur is a very important day, but it's not explicit in the Torah what happened on Yom Kippur, other than this is the day that God set. But keeping this in mind, so Yom Kippur is the remarkable moment of forgiveness of the grave sin of the Jewish people, and the ultimate symbol of forgiveness that God gave them a new set of tablets. Yom Kippur is the day Moshe came down with them. And we talk so much about Rosh Chodesh Elul and, the shofar blowing, kind of getting into the zone. That parallels that 40-day period. So I know that was more than you asked for, Rose. Sorry about that, but I think it's just interesting to think about. Nancy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, and maybe we should keep this question till later, because we know that eventually Moshe and Aaron or Leviim kill a lot of the people who were worshiping the golden calf. Did they make distinctions between the people who did it, who were gung-ho, and the people who were kind of saying, well, I really just wanted to give a thanks to Hashem, but everybody else was doing this, so I went along. Was there a distinction between those kinds of motivations?
A really interesting, really important point, Nancy. Very valid. Okay, so Rashi brings down, remember, according to Rashi, the whole thing was avodah zarah, right? You know what I mean? So it's very different than what we were talking about yesterday with the Ramban, and what we talk about today with the Ramban also. So according to Rashi, see, it seems there were three categories. It seems there were people who were actively killed by the Leviim, as you mentioned. There's an idea that Moshe gave the equivalent of sota waters to some of the people to drink, to see, like, God will decide what the story is with them.
Oh, wow.
And some people, of course, just were fine. Nobody did anything to them. So according to Rashi, the distinction is there are some people who there were witnesses. Remember, Levi didn't get involved in this stuff. Levi didn't get involved in the Egel. So there were people, there were witnesses who said, yes, before they went and bowed to the golden calf, we told them, don't do it. Don't do it. We warned them, you're not supposed to do it, which is the classic mode in capital punishment with Beis Din.
Right.
And they did it anyway. So according to Rashi, that was the most severe group. And if I remember correctly, the group that would drink the waters were people who there were witnesses, but there wasn't appropriate warning. So you could always argue, there's not appropriate warning, you could always argue they didn't understand the gravity, they didn't understand whatever. Yeah. So that's according to Rashi. I would imagine that according, I don't, it's not that I know that he didn't say it, I just don't remember that he said it. I would imagine, according to the Ramban, the distinction is the people who they were able to ascertain were clearly serving a God. I mean, if you're bowing, that's not a liaison. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the people who it was clear were really serving God, I suppose, were the ones who were killed. And then if they didn't know what the story was with someone, then presumably you gave them the benefit of the doubt, and the rest was God's department.
Right.
Which is how we operate, of course, in general. It was so important. It was so important in that moment that there be a clear message by the leadership of Bnei Israel that this is utterly, totally unacceptable, and we have to eradicate that approach from our midst. You know, and again, this is not for us to do without divine guidance, but they were. I mean, this was.
I find it hard to conceptualize that some people gave warning and said, "Hey, this is serious. Don't do this," because I believe there's another story that somebody said, "Don't do this," and they killed them.
Right. So the Medrash says, Rashi brings that also. The Medrash says that Hur, the nephew of Moshe and Aaron, was did I say Hur? The nephew of Moshe and Aaron was warned them and got killed. And actually, the Medrash says that's what Aaron saw. Remember, we started with what did Aaron see already? Aaron saw that, and he now. But I think the difference would be that. I mean, I can visualize this. One is someone gets up, you know, kind of like puts down a soapbox, stands up in front of everybody. Listen, fellow Jews, this is Avodah Zarah. That's one thing. Yeah. This, what I'm imagining here, is like, imagine if there was somebody you knew who was doing something really bad and you were close with them. And like, maybe you would go up to them, not a press conference. You would go up to them just quietly and say, you know, this is really wrong. Do you get this? Would you, you know, don't do this. That's sort of what I'm visualizing. You know what I mean?
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Rose. Okay.
Yeah. No, the dates, I agree that the dates are helpful.
The dates are really interesting to think about. Really interesting to think about. Yeah. Okay. Everybody should have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.